Lamed Gimel Lamed Aleph 31a. 31a. So, as I mentioned on Friday, we began a statement which had two statements. We analyzed one, now we get to the other. The first statement was with respect to the direction Mezuzah is to be hanging on the wall, on the door, whether straight, meaning horizontal or vertical, and we learned a little bit how we compromise and we put it at an angle. You know, the logic behind all that stuff. Rashi is of the view that vertical is more respectful, it's standing up. Rabbi Tam says horizontal is more respectful, it's lying down, like when you read a Torah, it's lying down horizontally. And the Ramah decided to do it on an angle, and that's how we do it, as a compromise between these two views. Now we get to the other statement, because the statement here which said, at least one of the two statements, which talked about which direction the Mezuzah is hanging, also talked about the entrance to a study hall. Now, the conversation here is a little bit, is only half the conversation, because there are at least two other locations, one in our Gemara, in the Babylonian Gemara, one in the Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, which talks about the law of the law of Mezuzah hanging in a shul and a house of study. And those Gemaras might come into conflict with this Gemara depending on how you understand our Gemara here. So we're going to start off by learning Rashi's view of this Gemara. And Rashi's view of this Gemara seems to be, is the most isolated. In other words, Rashi, his commentary is written as such that it's supposed to be an aid for reading the Gemara in front of you. So rarely does Rashi introduce other Gemaras, other quotations, and say, well, the Gemara says that, so you have to learn the Gemara here differently. Doesn't do that. Rashi is an aid for you learning the Gemara as you're going forward. So if you want to just read and understand this Gemara in isolation, Rashi is your best bet. Once you start going to other commentaries, they'll introduce you to 5 other Gemaras, and they'll have to either, mend the meaning of the Gemara here or mend the meaning of the Gemara somewhere else to make it all fit. Rashi doesn't do any of that. So the easiest way to learn our Gemara in isolation is Rashi's view. So we're going to start with Rashi's view, just so we can understand this Gemara. And then once we get to that, we'll maybe introduce some of the other opinions, and we'll see how we come to a halachic conclusion a little bit. Another thing I want to note is there's a difference between a shul and a Beit Midrash. Beit HaKnesset and a Beit Midrash. A Beit HaKnesset means a shul, and a Beit Midrash means a study hall. What's the difference? The difference is, to what degree does the person using these rooms live in that space? This is true for Mezuzah, and it's true for many of the halachas as well. For example, if we were to make a Beit HaKnesset, a shul, that was a halachic shul. What do I mean halachic shul? Because most of the Beit HaKnesset we built today are built on condition. Meaning to say, we built it on condition that we're going to build this as a sanctuary to be meant for prayer, but on condition that we're allowed to eat in it and talk in it. Right? Because if the Beit HaKnesset was a halachic Beit HaKnesset, if it was a halachic shul, then it gets a miniature, at least according to some opinions, it gets a miniature version of holiness from the temple that stood in Jerusalem, and therefore you cannot eat, you cannot talk, you wouldn't be able to say hello to your friend in there. Nothing. You couldn't make kiddush in there, and a retractable wall to extend your social hall into the shul would be out of the question. So our shuls are basically all made on condition. So there is a living in there of your own because you're eating, which is a personal endeavor. But if it were halachic shul, you couldn't do anything other than pray, then it has no living element to it. You're in there to service Hashem, and then you get out. You're not living there, you're not doing your own stuff. Even halacha discusses even if you're allowed to count money for tzedakah, because it's a place of prayer, not to do your even communal mitzvah business, at least according to some views. However, when it comes to a Beit Midrash, a study hall, although on the one hand it gets a higher level of holiness, the study hall, because the mitzvah of study is on a higher standing in some degrees than the mitzvah of prayer, but the nature of studying is that you spend, if you're a student in yeshiva, then you're spending 8-9 hours a day in your study hall, which means inevitably you're going to be talking, inevitably you're walking around, inevitably you're going to be eating a snack or something. So even a Beit Midrash, even a study hall which is built with all the halachic ramifications of a proper study hall, has an element of living in it. So I'm just going to put this out there now, so that when we talk about study hall, we're talking about a study hall specifically, not a synagogue. And when we get to the end, we're going to talk about the distinctions in halacha between a study hall and a synagogue, between a Beit Midrash and a Beit HaKnesset, and it's going to help us frame our Gemara a little bit in comparison to other Gemaras. Clear? Yeah?
The Beit HaKnesset, in the context of the Gemara, were they the strict halachic versions?
If the Gemara says Beit HaKnesset, yes.
Okay.
Although the Gemara says...
we should think that
that's correct. That's right. If you learn Gemara and talk about the laws of Beit HaKnesset, it's talking about a proper Beit HaKnesset. Although the Gemara declares elsewhere that kol Beit HaKnesset shebabavel al tanai hanasuyis, that all of the synagogues built in Bavel, meaning in exile, are already made on condition. Now, what does that mean? It means that do I have to make which condition? And it's likely the Gemara doesn't mean the condition the condition of allowing you to eat in there, but actually the condition of allowing you to sell it. Because if you can't sell a temple, you can't.
Not a living place.
Yeah, so it depends how far you take this condition that all of the synagogues in exile have. Is it for eating while it's standing, or it's for, or is it such that it allows you to sell it when you're done? All kinds of discussions about that. I think I once went through the laws of Beit HaKnesset and what the halachic definition of a Chabad house is. There's a special caveat in halacha for a Chabad house. It doesn't say the word Chabad house, but there's a certain halachic caveat that Chabad houses could fall under, whether the person building it is aware of it or not, and that's the interesting thing. Whether the shliach is aware of this halachic caveat or not, he still falls in that category. Maybe one day we'll get to that. A little cliffhanger, a little teaser, but that's not for now. Okay, so Lamed Gimel Lamed Aleph, 31a, and we have the second statement. So the first one was, again, about whether the mezuzah should be hanging vertically or horizontally. We had two different opinions, and we had a compromise that we do it at an angle. And now we're getting to the question of the shul. So the line starts with the word ki istavirya, vira, and the second word is eni. Yeah. So the Gemara asks Eni, is it so that the home of Rabbi, which the Gemara cited earlier as having mezuzahs either vertical or horizontal, depending on which version you take, but also the Gemara mentioned that there was a private door that Rabbi had to go from his home into his study hall, and that small little door was positioned right by his seat. And the way Rashi told it to us, it was a small little entrance, and the reason why he used that entrance because he didn't want to walk through the main entrance. If he walked through the main entrance, everybody in the study hall would stand up for him, and he didn't want to bother everybody every time he's going in and out of the thing. So he had a little small trap door that went from his house directly into his seat, so he'd slip in, sit down, and nobody even noticed that he walked in, and he wouldn't have to bother all the students from learning every time he walked in and out. And the Gemara said that little trap door that Rebbe used to go from his home to his seat in the study hall did not have a mezuzah. That's what the Gemara says. Now we're going to try to figure out why that is. Why didn't Rebbe have a mezuzah on that door? So let's see. Is that the case where a small little door going from a home to a study hall doesn't get a mezuzah? Vahu pitra. There was this door to have an aisle bar Rav Huna the Beit Midrash that Rav Huna would use to enter into the study hall, presumably also from his home, like Rebbe. Vahavalo mezuzah, and it didn't have a mezuzah.
It did?
It did. It's a contradiction. Rebbe's little door that went from his home to his seat in the study hall in the Beit Midrash did not have a mezuzah. Rav Huna's little door did have. So we have to find some distinction between the two. Says the Gemara, Hahu, that door of Rav Huna, Ragil Hava, was open and available to everybody. And the way Rashi says it, again we're learning the way Rashi says it, meaning the majority of people, when they would enter the study hall, would also use that door. So Rebbe's door was private for him to enter into the study hall. Rav Huna's door was for everybody. The majority, maybe there were more doors to the study hall, that could be true, but the majority of people would enter through that door, and that's why it had a mezuzah. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda was exclusively for him, and therefore no mezuzah. So let's analyze that. Let's understand that. To Rabbi Yehuda Marav, for Rabbi Yehuda said in Mavrav, the mezuzah, with respect to mezuzah, halach acher haragel. You follow the majority of traffic. And what does this mean? What does this mean? You follow the majority of traffic. So the way Rashi says it, let's look at the Rashi. If you look at the bottom right column, the column on the right. So if you go just under the second diagram, the line right under the second diagram, ball that is halach acher haragel. You follow here. You follow after the majority. Im yesh beis psachim lecheder echad. If there are two doors to one room. So Rashi is not making this an issue of a study hall. He's making this an issue of, generally speaking, a room. If there are two entrances to one room, if there's one door into which it's more common that people enter and exit, that's where you put the mezuzah. So in Rashi's view, a room that has two doors, only one door gets mezuzah. Only the door that has the majority of traffic. So let's look at the way Rashi's learning this Gemara. Why did Rabbi Yehuda's door not have a mezuzah? Not because it was a Beit Midrash he was going into, but because it was a private door. So in Rashi's view, a Beit Midrash, a study hall, gets a mezuzah. Because as I mentioned, it's a place of living. People eat, people drink. So even if Rashi is of the view, and this is the implication of Gemara elsewhere, that a Beit HaKnesset, that a Shul does not require mezuzah, because it's strictly for prayer, there's no living quarters there, and that's the verse says. The verse says you should put your mezuzah in all of your living quarters, and Beit HaKnesset is not a living quarter because you're praying. However, when it comes to a Beit HaMedrash, when it comes to a Shul, when it comes to a study hall, not a Shul, a study hall, you do get a mezuzah, because it is living quarters. So why is that Rabbi Yehuda's door didn't have one? Because it was an exclusive entrance. Not really an exclusive, but because it was the less used entrance. Now, for full clarity, if you turn the page to two pages, Talmud Amud Aleph, 34a, which we'll elaborate more on next week. There the Gemara says, on the fourth line, second to last word, Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna says, Im yesh loy pesach echad. If you have one door, chayav mezuzah, you require to have mezuzah. Achas, one mezuzah. Im yesh bebeis psachin. If you have two doors, chayav b'shnei mezuzahs. You need to have two doors. It's talking about a ladder. We'll get to that later. Two mezuzahs. I'm sorry. Two doors. You need two mezuzahs. Amar Papa says, Shmamina mera Rav Huna. The implication of Rav Huna is hayin deruna. Despa arbe babi. This, I'm not sure what deruna is, but this place that has four entrances, chayiv ba'ab mezuzahs, needs four mezuzahs. Says the Gemara, Pshita, this is obvious. You have four doors, why wouldn't you need four mezuzahs? Says the Gemara, Lo tzricha, no, you need this. Afagav deraga b'chad, even though even if you only use one. So here the Gemara says so the other one which said you have to have, the first statement which said you have to have two doors means two mezuzahs. I could say the reason why I need two mezuzahs is because I use them equally. Two mezuzahs. But here the Gemara says if I have four doors, even though I only use one, I'm required to put mezuzahs on all four. And yet here Rashi is saying that if you have two doors, one is used more, one is used less, only put mezuzahs on the one that has more. So Rashi of course addresses that contradiction. And we'll look at the first answer. Rashi has two answers there, which we'll get to both of them when we learn the Gemara there. But for now, we'll learn the first answer, because it helps us better with learning the halacha. This is the Rashi on the Aleph, on the right-hand column, the bold word, the right-hand column in Rashi. Even though we're used to using one of the four doors, tvei more often, that which we said earlier, referring to our Gemara that we're learning today. Halach achar ragel, you go after that which you use more. And the other ones don't get a mezuzah. Hanimili, this only is, kagoin, for example, today, babi, two doors. V'ragel b'chad, and you use only one. then betela idach lagabe, then the second door is nullified to it. Aval talasa, but 3 doors lagabe chad, comparing it to 1, loy beteli are not nullified. So Rashi's view, it's like this. When you have 2 doors, one is more common, one is less common, only put the mezuzah on the door that has more traffic. The second one is nullified to the first. And therefore Rabbi Yehuda's door, which was an entrance to his study hall, was a secondary entrance. Only one person used it. The main entrance to the synagogue, even though it had another door, sorry?
There were only 2 in that case.
So there were only, there must have been.
The secondary is the other explanation. That's Rashi's second.
One second. There's only 2 doors. You're right. There's only 2 doors. There's only 2 doors in this study hall. And the main entrance got a mezuzah, and the second door was nullified to it because it was less used. Even though maybe more than one person used it, let's say. But it was secondary for sure to the first one. However, once you hit 2, and then certainly 3, once you hit 3, then certainly 4 doors, then the other doors can't be nullified to your main door. And therefore, to your question here, where we have 3 doors, that's right. There's 3 doors in this room, 1, 2, and 3. So even though that one is barely ever used, even in Rashi's view, it needs a mezuzah.
If this were not here, then in that view.
And in Rashi's view.
In Rashi's view, then it wouldn't.
That's correct. But all of this is to say, this is all only if you're of the view that the problem with this Gemara, that the reason, that's, sorry?
If it's whether primary or secondary.
Yes, but more importantly, that's only if you're of the view that a Beit Midrash gets a mezuzah. If you're of the view that a study hall gets a mezuzah, now you can discuss what's the main entrance to the study hall, what's the secondary entrance to the study hall. But now we have other views. The Gemara implies elsewhere, Taisus quotes this Gemara, and the Rosh quotes this Gemara, others quote this Gemara, the Gemara in Yuma, and in Brachas. Sorry, the Gemara in Yuma implies that says that there's a dispute whether shuls or synagogues, whether shuls and Beit Midrash get mezuzahs. And the Gemara in Brachas, which we learned, implies that the halacha is that it's not required to have mezuzah because it's not yours, it's not a dwelling place. Mm-hmm. There's a story of 2 sages that were walking, and one sage commented about the other sage, and the implication of the discussion is that the Beit Midrash study hall is not required in mezuzah. And therefore, the way the Rosh frames this discussion is as follows: the study hall does not need mezuzah. So why did Rav Huna have mezuzah going from in his entrance to the study hall? So says the Rosh, that's because that was the entrance to his home from his study hall. So the reason why Rav Huna's, in other words, the question between Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda about whether or not to have a mezuzah by this door that's going into the study hall, their private door, is not a question of the study hall, but it's a question of their home, because they're coming from their home to the study hall. So Rav Yehuda, the question is not whether they should have mezuzah because it's an entrance to a study hall.
What do you mean from the study hall to the home?
Either way.
Either way.
It's the point is it's an entrance/exit to their home. It happened to be going into a study hall. So had it been isolated from their home, there would be no mezuzah there because it's a study hall, in the view of the Rosh. In the view of the Gemara in Brachas, which implies that study halls do not need mezuzahs.
So that would be the reasoning for why.
Right. So Rav Huna is whose door, that's right. So now the question becomes, why did Rav Huda's door to his home, which happened to go to study hall, not have mezuzah? And Rav Huna's door to his home, which happened to go to study hall, also did have mezuzah. And there's the answer. Because Rabbi Yehuda's door is exclusively for him. Which means as follows. In this view, if you have a room in which there are 2 doors, one door is open to anybody who wants to use it, and one is exclusively for one person. In this view, if the door is exclusively for one person, no mezuzah is required. Because it isn't a door for the living quarters, because everybody else has a different way to get into that room. So let's say this room, let's take Rabbi Huda's example. He had the Beit Midrash study hall attached to his home. He had a private door going from his home to his study hall. Now that room, now anybody else who wanted to get into that room, which had the trap door to his synagogue, to his study hall, how would they get into that room? They wouldn't dare use his private room, his private door. That's his private door. No one's going to use Rebbe's private door. You would go to the front door, knock on the door, and ask permission to go in that room from a different entrance.
From the main entrance.
From the main entrance of the home. So in that view, if you have 2 doors in a room, and one door is exclusively for one person only, and everybody else that wants to access that room uses a different door, then only that door, which everybody uses, gets a mezuzah. The door, which is exclusively for one person, does not get a mezuzah.
But didn't Hashem say that to put it on your doorposts?
That's right, but doorposts of your dwelling. So it has to be qualified as an entrance to the dwelling. This isn't an entrance to the dwelling. This is a private exit for you. The entrance to the dwelling is somewhere else. And therefore, in this view, study hall is not your dwelling. And the way the Rambam puts it, it actually rules that a Beit Midrash, a study hall, does not need a mezuzah. The Rambam writes this. And he says the reason why is because it's holy. It's a holy, sacred place. It's not your dwelling. No mezuzah is required in the Rambam's view, and in the Tosfos view, and the Rosh's view. Well, actually, not necessarily Tosfos, but for sure the Rosh's view.
So what's the purpose of a mezuzah?
The purpose of
The
mezuzah?
purpose of a mezuzah.
Is two things. You are dedicating your dwelling to Hashem, and Hashem is protecting your dwelling. But if this door is not your dwelling, then there's no mezuzah. So if a study hall doesn't get it, at least in this view, that's why I gave this two views, right? That's why I gave this introduction. Study hall, on the one hand, you live there all day and you're eating there, so it could be your dwelling. And therefore Rashi says it does get a mezuzah. Rosh is learning in this Gemara that a study hall does not get a mezuzah. And the Rambam also learns that a study hall does not get a mezuzah. Now the question of Rabbi Huda's door is only because it's exclusively to him. Whereas Rav Huna's door was meant for everybody. So it was a proper entrance / exit to his home. So he had a mezuzah, nothing to do with the study hall. The fact that the study hall was there is incidental to the equation here. That's the point. You understand?
So why don't we just have one mezuzah on our front door?
Sorry?
Why don't we have just one mezuzah on our front door? Anything else?
Why don't you? In theory, maybe, but each room in your house is another dwelling. It says the doors, plural, of your dwelling. This is all your dwelling, so all the doors in your dwelling get a mezuzah. That's the verse says. The doors, yeah. It's plural, sure. Mezuzah is beisecha. Mezuzah means the plural, the doorposts, plural of your door, of your home and your gates. But it's plural, right? So we have to define each door. Is it indeed a door to your dwelling? And therefore, two ways of looking at this. One way of looking at it is the Gemara's question here is nothing to do with the fact. The Gemara's question here is a question of whether this is considered a proper entrance to the study hall. The study hall is indeed considered a dwelling in Rashi's view, and therefore it is required mezuzah because you live there, you eat there. Now the question is, does this side trap door constitute as an entrance to the study hall? Rav Huna's yes, because many people used it, and Rabbi Huda's no, Rebbe's no, because there was another main entrance. And in Rashi's view, when you have two doors, one main, one side, only the main door gets the mezuzah, unless you have 3 doors or 4 doors. The other view says study halls don't get mezuzah because the study hall is not your dwelling. The question of Rebbe's door was because that was an exclusive door to his home, and everybody else uses a different one. And because this was an exclusive door, no mezuzah. So what's the halach? Everything the way I just described the Gemara to you is elucidated by the Beis Yosef. It's not my own reading. The Beis Yosef elucidates this reading Rashi versus the Rosh. Now, in terms of halacha, before we get to the halacha, I want to show you one last line from the bottom of Tosfos. I'm not going to the whole Tosfos, but the last line, the very, very last line on this page. So the margin on the bottom is the Tosfos, Lamed Gimel Mud Aleph, yes, back to our Gemara. The last line, it says like this, Ubi Yerushalmi, and in the Jerusalem Talmud. So I mentioned to you that Tosfos earlier said that he cites one Gemara which says that the dispute whether or not a Beit HaKnesset, a Shul, or a Beit Midrash and a Beit Midrash get mezuzahs, dispute, and another Gemara which implies the law is Shuls and Beit Midrash do not get mezuzahs, which in Rashi's opinion, in the way Rashi learned the Gemara, that would mean it's a contradiction to our Gemara, which means one Gemara says that a Beit Midrash does not need a mezuzah. Our Gemara in Rashi's view says a Beit Midrash does get a mezuzah, right? Because according to Rashi, the issue was whether it's a main entrance or a side entrance, but a mezuzah is required in the Beit Midrash according to Rashi, right? So now there's another source. Ubi Yerushalmi, in the Jerusalem Talmud says Tosfos, Perek Shein the Megillah, chapter 2 of Tractate Megillah. Mashma, the implication is the Beit Midrash of Rabbi Chanina, the study hall of Rabbi Chanina, Hayy by Mezuzah, did have a mezuzah because it was a place that he lived. Menachot keneged ktefei shel adam, and it was placed corresponding to the shoulder of man, not by the height of the door. So somehow I have to do it. So this is where I'm leaving a little open. God willing, tomorrow I'll come back with more research on this. But for some reason, somehow, the entrance to a study hall is not measured by the size of the door, even if the door is very tall, but rather the height of mezuzah is measured by the height of the shoulder. Which is why I think if you go to the doors downstairs, even though they're very tall doors, the mezuzahs are shoulder height. They're not third to the top, as we should learn soon. But God will, Sorry?
You don't have to climb a ladder
Yeah.
to get.
So God willing, when we get tomorrow, we'll get to where the height of the mezuzah should be, and we'll see different views about it, and maybe we'll come to some understanding as to why there's this idea of the shoulder height. We'll get to that, God willing. But for now, just looking at the fact that the Gemara Yerushalmi says that Beit Midrash does have mezuzah. Now, what's unique is that the previous two sources that Taisva cited, the first one, which there's a dispute whether or not study hall, you with me?
Yeah.
There's a dispute whether or not the study hall and the Beit Midrash needs a mezuzah. And the other Gemara, which said that the conclusion is that a study hall does not need a mezuzah. Those two put study hall and shul together, whereas this one separates it. This one, Rabbi Chanina says only study hall exclusively. And therefore the halacha is as follows. The halacha indeed states that a shul, which does not have any element of dwelling to it, is not required in mezuzah. Again, our shuls do have an element of dwelling because we eat in them. But a shul that has no element of dwelling, the Shulchan Aruch phrased it a little bit differently, referencing the Gemara of somebody who used to have people who lived in the shul. The Gabbai or whoever it was would live in the synagogue. So because he lived there, he had a mezuzah. And the Ramah discusses where is his dwelling. Is his dwelling in the actual shul, or is it somewhere outside? And if it's somewhere outside, maybe his door gets mezuzah but not the shul. At any rate, what emerges is that a shul, if it had no element of dwelling, is not required in mezuzah. A study hall, says the Shulchan Aruch, does also not require a mezuzah. However, the Shulchan Aruch brings a different opinion that it is required to have a study hall, to have a mezuzah. Who should those opinion be? It would be Rashi's interpretation of this Gemara, which says that a study hall doesn't need a mezuzah, and it would be the Yerushalmi, which quoted from Rabbi Chanina that it did have a mezuzah on the study hall. And if the Shulchan Aruch concludes, you should put it in mezuzah, but no bracha, because we don't know if you're required. So put up mezuzah, but no bracha on the entrance to the study hall. The Bach I saw, Beit Yosef also says that you can. I saw it in the Bach for sure. I think he says in Beit Yosef that if you can put a mezuzah on a door of your home with a bracha, and have in mind that the bracha is going to cover the door to your study hall. But the Shulchan Aruch does say that if you have a private entrance from your home directly into the study hall, if it's not exclusively your door, which means other people can use it, then mezuzah is there too. But not because it's an entrance to the study hall, but because it's an exit / entrance to your home. Following?
Yeah.
So this is the halacha when it comes to the law of the Beit Midrash, the law of the
Doesn't that follow
study hall.
Rabbi's view? His private one
Yeah, so
didn't have one.
the Beit Yosef is following the Rambam's interpretation / the Rashi's interpretation. But he's also taking note of the fact that A, there's Rashi's interpretation of the Gemara, which says you are required to have a mezuzah on the study hall, and B, there's the Yerushalmi, which says that Rabbi Chanina had a door on the study hall. So therefore he says, put it up without a bracha, because it's a dispute. Right? I should conclude that the Beit Yosef tells us, or maybe the Torah even says it. It could be the Torah even says it. Yeah, that the Rami Rottenberg, famous early, late Rishon, early Achron, somewhere there, he had a mezuzah. Actually, the Gemara, he said that initially the Rami Rottenberg, this famous sage, he was imprisoned. Right, he was imprisoned, and they wanted a ransom, and he refused to let the Jews pay his ransom, because he said, if you pay my ransom, next time they're going to take other Jews and charge more, because they see that you can easily convince the Jews to give money for ransom. So he refused. Imagine that. Sat in jail and refused to allow Jews to redeem him, to take ransom, even though it's a mitzvah to pidyon shvulim, to help Jews get out of jail.
My grandmother was a Rothenberg.
Yeah, so it's a descendant of this.
I'm also related to Rutenberg.
Rutenberg? So do some genealogy, see if you're related to the Rami Rottenberg. Famous scholar.
My family. Ugh.
So the Torah says like this, that the Rami Rottenberg wrote that initially he didn't have a mezuzah in his study hall, and whenever he used to fall asleep in a study hall, as I mentioned before, study hall is not as the laws of study hall are more lax than the laws of shul, because the laws of study hall you're expected to sit there all day, and therefore you can eat, you can fall, take a nap. So he says like this: whenever he would fall asleep in his study hall before he put up mezuzah, ruach ra mevatata, a evil spirit would bother him. He decided something's wrong in my study hall. He put up mezuzah in his study hall, and then it stopped. So the Ram Rottenberg, I don't know if he's using this as a halachic basis, but certainly it seems like he was of the view, to follow Rashi's view and the view of the Yerushalmi, that study halls are required to have mezuzah. And this adds to the weight to the idea that even if you're not going to make a bracha, because there are views that say you're not supposed to have mezuzah in the study hall, or at least you're not required to, so put one up, but without a bracha. And if you can, put mezuzah in another door that is required and have it in mind. Have a wonderful day, everybody.